Welcome to our weekly webinar. This is Patrick at Qdabra, and today we're talking about locking or protecting the data in your forms. And we have a demo that Don Frack prepared, and Don's going to be with me and be presenting that demo in a moment. First, to get us in the right frame of mind, I've got a couple quick questions for you. The first question is, do you have forms that are edited by multiple people? And that's a pretty obvious question. Everyone does. So, and I'm getting no responses saying no. It looks like everyone's saying yes. So we'll close that and move to the next question. The next question is, how do you prevent one user from overwriting or writing over another user? And this one, you might be doing multiple items, but in general, there's no default way to do this. Well, the default way in SharePoint is to use Checkin Checkout. We'll talk about the reason why that's not a great solution in a minute. But there's also this ability to assign a form to a user and then check to see if the user is currently assigned and switch to a different view if they're not. Some people use that. I need to launch the poll here. Sorry about that. So those are your questions. Obviously, you can have users coordinate amongst themselves. That's the manual option. And then, of course, maybe you don't have anything today. It looks like a couple of you don't have anything. So those are the kind of give you an idea of what we're really talking about today. So it looks like most of you are not doing anything today, and then one of you is doing manual. Great to have you here. So we're talking about locking, and locking the form's data is important to prevent those overwrites. And that we're going to show today how to do it not just at a form level, but also using a section or an item in the form. And there's some challenges to doing this. I mean, it's not that hard, but you have to actually make sure the data is submitted to a list or a database. That's one thing. If you're doing it at not at the form level, but at the item level, then you will need to. You can't save it as an XML form anymore. You have to save it either to a list or to a database. So that's the caveat when you're doing item level edits and locking. We'll show that in a minute. We're going to be using lists today in SharePoint, which is a very simple technique to do. It's also a good technique for forms in general. For really complex forms, it isn't. For document-centric forms, it's not. But for this scenario that we have today, it is. Well, obviously today, if you have two users, this is the scenario that we're in. They open the same form 1, 2, 3. They make some edits to it, and they save changes. And depending on who saves the changes last, that person ends up overwriting the other person. So this is a big issue today. The reason why default functionality is not good, obviously, Checkin Checkout is there. You have to go to SharePoint to get to it, which is the problem. So you have a separate step there to go and check out the form, and then people leave stuff checked out. That's not good. Obviously, admins can go in and uncheck it out, but it is a separate step. It doesn't provide the in-form, sort of the more granular edits, like the in-form item level edits. So you can restrict access based on assignment as well, but once again, that's form level. So it's not going to give you the more detailed edits. So we're going to show 3 techniques today. We'll show the document level locking. Once again, you have the out-of-box check-in, check-out, which requires an extra step. You've got the check for assignment and switch to a view, which requires some extra work in your form. We'll show you another way to do document level locking today. Don's going to do a demo in a second. And then he'll also show how to do section level locking. So within the form, you want to have 2 people editing it at the same time. That's cool. And we'll show how to do that. And we'll also go even one step further and show item level locking. And this is the most flexible. Obviously, you could have lots of different levels in your document. So we're just showing these 3 levels today. You could apply the same techniques, though, to a document that has more than 3 levels. So without any further ado, I'm going to come back to this slide in a second, but I want to switch to Don, and he's going to give us a quick demo. Don? You should have the floor. I can hear you.
Yep. Okay, so I'm just selecting which screen to show. Give me 1 second. Are you seeing FormsViewer?
Yep.
Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'll be showing you our lock form, which performs a lock technique to lock items in the inner list. So here we have the this form, which we can pre-populate. So I'll just populate this with some data and show you how it works. Okay, so let's say we populated all of these and submit this to the list. So here's what's going to happen. It's going to populate this list with new items. Okay, so I'll just close this for now. And let's go back to the list. So as you can see here, the new items should be entered. Let me just refresh it. So it's here. It's this one. And we have a list for the main form, the sections, and the items underneath the sections. So if we go back to the form, here's the pre-populated form which I already have. You can lock these items and prevent other users from using it. So let's say I click on this one, and let me show you what's happening in the main list. So what this did is that it set this column is locked here to true so that other users would not be able to edit it. So if I open up the same form, let me just pull that out here and try to lock it for myself and perform an edit, it should show a prompt here which says that somebody else has it locked since this date. Okay, now if it's we've added a logic here which performs an override in case it's locked for over a day and you need to add your edits. So let me just check here if this is working. Okay, looks like it's not. Give me 1 sec to check that out. Format 8, so it's not performing that. Let me just see. Okay, because it needs to take about 5 minutes or more for this form, because that's how I've set it. So here I'll just show the form in design mode and show you what's happening in the background. So for this one, when you lock a form, it first checks if the form or if the current section or item is locked. And here it's setting the SharePoint ID and queries the list for that item. Now, this logic right here is the one which determines if the item is locked or not. So if the is locked column is equal to true, it's going to set this section over here or this field over here and tells it that it's locked. And if it's locked is true, it's going to show this prompt here, which was shown earlier, that the case study title has been locked for editing by the person who locked it. And then this is the simple approach. Now, if you have multiple sections, we can also add that. But this is a more complex approach since we have a repeating table nested inside another repeating table. So what's good with this is that if you have lots of sections in your form, you now have a centralized approach for locking all of these items. And I'll show you that here quickly. So here you have a specific lock for each row. So you can just lock one row. And you can also lock the whole section. But for this one, I added logic here to determine if one row is locked, so it's going to show a prompt. lock error here. So one item has already been locked, so you have to edit the or proceed with the changes first before you could lock the whole section. And what's going to happen is that this is going to lock all of these sections. And let's go back to the list. Here you will see a couple of items from the row which should be locked. Okay, so this would prevent other people from editing these rows. So if we go back to the other form sample, we can get that one quickly.
How are you mapping the data, Don, to the list? Are you using the submit to SharePoint list command?
For the mapping, yeah, I'm using the submit SharePoint list, which is here. Mapping. Okay, so if we're submitting or editing an item, we're using this command, submit to SharePoint list, and it's using a mapping file here, which is the mapping edit.
So it's just one
So
map,
for this,
right? Just one map, right?
for this form, I'm using 3 mappings. One mapping for the whole form, and one mapping to lock the item, so it's a specific item, and one for editing. So if we go to the okay, so if we go to the form and design mode, you'll see here that we have 3 mappings for this one, and I'll show you what items are mapped. Okay, so for the lock form, I'm going to select this one. This is the initial mapping, which submits the whole thing to all the 3 lists. So for the case study, this is the main item, or the one at the top for the main section. It's mapping these 4 items: title, description, SharePoint ID, and the GUID. Now for the case items, or the case sections, we have these 3, and for the case items. Now for the other mapping, for the lock mapping, I only have one item locked, which is the is locked column, for the 3 items here.
It's interesting that you're not doing repeating on these. You're actually, because all of the sections and all the items are in the same table, right?
Right.
That's clever.
And this one is for the editing. And for this one, I've added a filter here where editing is true, so that we will only update the items which is currently being edited.
Great. So
okay.
You want to go back and see if that locking is timed out yet?
Yeah. Let's reopen the form here. So with this other form, let's say somebody open it up and try to unlock this one or lock this, and here you can see that it showed a prompt, and it allows you to override if you wish to, if you need to perform an edit. So if we click on yes, it's going to override the lock on the list, and it should allow you to update the data.
But it only shows that if it's more than 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can increase that to how much the duration you need, and submit the data.
And you're using server time to make sure that the time is the same for all users, right?
Right. Yeah. There's a problem with the now function. So for this form, we used the server time here. So what it's doing is it's determining the server time, which uses a JS script or a JavaScript, and it's being loaded on form load. Okay, so
I think we've already talked about that technique in a previous webinar. That's pretty cool. But the problem with now is that it's just different for each client, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You can't use it to compare.
mhm, yep. So yeah, I think that's the summary of it.
Great. I'm going to switch back to my screen and we'll quickly wrap up here. The can you see my screen okay, Don?
Yep. Mhm.
So what we're doing here, what Don showed, is a sample form, which we just happened to call the case study form because we're working on case studies this week. And it's a simple form. It's got, a section for the summary, the challenge, the solution that we created for the customer. We're a Microsoft partner and we do case studies to keep our partnership with Microsoft. And so this week we're doing a case study with a new company, and that's why I thought of that sample. We're using a SharePoint list to hold the data, and that's key in these when you're doing item level or section level locking. You need to be able to extract the data so that it's separate, so you can have separate locks for the separate data. If you're just doing the form level locks, you don't need the list. You can just do it using the stock library, and that's also, you can do that with an assignment as well. You can have an assignment in the form, who it's assigned to, and then you check the assignment when the form's opened. If they're not the person that the form's assigned to, then you switch to a read-only view. Now you could do this technique though if you don't have assignment. In other words, anybody can open it and edit it. Then you could use this form level technique to lock it. And what you would do is you would have a separate column in your library for whether it's locked or not. And then you would save the form on open if it wasn't locked, and you'd set that field to locked and then save it. And then that would prevent other people from editing it on open. You would check that field as well. And right, what we're doing is we're checking it when they click on the button. So we're actually giving you a level of control that is more granular or more precise, so that we're doing it on a button click. But it's the same technique. We're querying list to see if it's locked. If it is, then we prevent them from editing it by popping up a message. If they've had it open for a long time, in this case 5 minutes, which isn't very long, then we allow them to override the lock. And that's actually a really key technique as well, as you want to be able to do that. I would not suggest 5 minutes. I would suggest 1 day. If people have had it open for a day, then obviously they're no longer opening it, or they're no longer editing it because the browser has timed out. Usually the browser times out in 30 minutes, so that would be a default to use 30 minutes. The submit to SharePoint list command is a FormsViewer command that allows you to map your data to these lists. Don showed how he had set that up. So it's pretty easy to do. And then you just have to add query logic to get the log status and then formatting in your form. So that's pretty much it for the demo today. We obviously are creating these webinars based on real life user scenarios. So in this case, we had a customer that had a very detailed document, and they had to have people, they had a very large document for doing quality assurance, and they had to have lots and lots of people editing different pieces of it at the same time. And that's where the inspiration for today's webinar came from, is that actual use case from that customer. So we know there's many other customers out there that have the same use case. Any questions for us today? I know we have a pretty light list of attendees today. Well, thank you for being here. If you have a question, please post it. I just want to quickly do a shout out. We are working on FormsViewer Designer piece right now to make sure that we can edit the layout as well in the FormsViewer app. The FormsViewer app is the only app out there today that lets you quickly move your forms off of InfoPath. You still need the designer. We haven't finished the designer functionality yet. We're working on that right now. Hope to have something out early next year. We've been working on it for quite a while now, and it just seems that people always have something else they want us to do. But we are working on it. Microsoft obviously has committed to supporting InfoPath Designer until 2026, but we don't think it's going to continue working with the cloud after about 2021 or 2022. It might even be sometime next year. Obviously, it'll be working through the end of next year. There's still lots and lots of people using InfoPath Designer to publish forms to online, SharePoint Online. But we're working on that because we know that that day is going to come eventually. But in the meantime, FormsViewer is the only app out there that allows you to move quickly off of InfoPath. We also include all these new features like submit to SharePoint lists. We have support for extensions in JavaScript. Don was talking about getting the server time. We obviously have signature controls and lots of things you can do with your forms. And then, of course, we support you. And it's easy to add the app from the SharePoint store if you've got an online account. We also support on-prem, and even if you don't have SharePoint, FormsViewer works. And I don't see any questions. I want to thank you for being here today. We'll get this webinar posted on YouTube and provide the materials that so that you actually, we have one question from Amika. Thank you, Amika. Is it possible to lock a form at a particular time of the day? So this would be like kind of an interesting question. I don't know what the use case would be for that, but you could you would have to have a process that would check the time of day. And once again, you're in Nigeria, I believe, but which time of day is it? Is it the time of day where you're at, or is it the server time of day? Is it some kind of universal time of day? And then the question would be, if it is a universal time of day, does it really make sense? So that's kind of an interesting question. And so your follow-on question is, and make it open the following day. So you'd have to have some trigger to do that. And so first off, I don't think there's a valid use case for that I can think of, because of the fact that people work in different time zones. You wouldn't have a specific time of day that you'd want it to open. You might want to fill out your timesheet at the end of the day. Maybe that's what you're thinking. But in that case, you wouldn't want it just to automatically, there wouldn't be any trigger to automatically open it. You'd have to go in and actually do it yourself. So I think the short answer is you could potentially have some kind of a server process that triggers it, or like a Microsoft Flow or Logic app, but I can't really imagine the use case where that would make sense. But thanks for asking the question. It's glad to see that you're here. I want to thank you all again for being here, and we look forward to presenting another webinar soon. We will be taking this technique probably and talking more about it next week, if not the following week. And we've got a bunch of other webinars scheduled for the end of the year. So hopefully you can make it. Thank you very much for being here. Have a great day. Thanks, Don. Awesome job.